In football, there is usually one clear path to the top. Win your league, qualify for Europe, climb your way into the Champions League. It's a system built on structure, progression, on rules that apply to everyone. At least, that's how it's supposed to work. Because in the middle of Europe, there is a football club that doesn't follow that path at all. A club that plays its league football in one country while representing another. A team that competes every season but can never become champion of its own nation. And yet, despite all of that, there is still a way for them to reach the biggest stage in football. But that path doesn't look like anything else in the game, because if this club ever wants to play in the Champions League, it cannot qualify the way every other team does. It doesn't have a domestic league title to rely on, it doesn't have a straightforward route. Instead, it would have to do something that sounds almost impossible. It would have to win its domestic cup, then go on to win the Conference League, then win the Europa League just to earn a place in the Champions League. Not over time, not as part of a long-term progression, but back-to-back wins. And that is not just unlikely, it's something football almost will never allow to happen. And yet, this is the reality of FC Vaduz, a club that exists between systems, between countries, and between the rules that define the game itself. Welcome to Hidden Club Stories, where every club carries a story. This is a story of FC Vaduz. This video is sponsored by Hidden Shirt Club. They sell premium football shirt mystery boxes with real stories. If you wanna discover your own story, you can use code TRIVINO10 at checkout. To understand why Vaduz faces a path like this, you have to step away from football for a moment and look at the country it represents, Liechtenstein. A nation so small that it is easy to overlook. Tucked between Switzerland and Austria, with a population of less than 40,000 people, it is one of the smallest countries in the world. And in football, size matters. Because building a league requires more than just clubs. It requires depth, structure, enough teams to sustain a competition over an entire season. Liechtenstein doesn't have that. It has clubs, it has players, it has a football association, but it doesn't have a league of its own. So instead of building something that couldn't survive, its clubs made a different choice. They joined another system, across the border in Switzerland. This is where Vaduz plays its league football. Week after week, season after season, competing against Swiss teams, climbing through a structure that technically doesn't belong to them. And at first glance, that seems like a solution. A way to stay competitive, a way to exist within the game, but it comes with consequence. Because while Vaduz can play in Switzerland, it doesn't represent Switzerland. It represents Liechtenstein. And that creates a situation that almost doesn't make sense. Because in the system of European football, your league defines your path. Your position determines your future, but Vaduz exists outside of that logic. It plays in one country, but belongs to another. And that means the usual rules no longer apply. In football, everything usually starts with one idea: winning your league. It is the most basic objective a club can have, the clearest measure of success and the most direct path towards something bigger. Because when you win your league, you move forward. You qualify for Europe, you enter a system that rewards success. It is simple, at least for most clubs. Because for Vaduz, that path doesn't exist. Not in the way football intends it. Yes, they compete in a league, they play full seasons, they fight for points, they move up and down the table like every other team. But no matter how well they perform, they can never become champions of their own country, because their country doesn't have a league to win. And even if Vaduz were to dominate the Swiss league system, even if they were to finish at the very top, it wouldn't represent Liechtenstein. It wouldn't open the door to European football, because in the structure of the game, your league determines your qualification, and Vaduz's league is not theirs. So for a long time, the club existed in a strange kind of limitation. competing every week, but without access to the most important reward, playing the game but without the main objective most teams are built around. And that changes everything, because when you remove the league as a pathway, you are left with only one option, one competition, one opportunity, one route that defines your entire season. When the usual path disappears, football doesn't stop, it adapts. And in Liechtenstein, that adaptation takes a very specific form. Because while the country does not have a league, it does have a cup. A single domestic competition played between all the clubs that represent Liechtenstein. On paper, it looks small, a limited number of teams, a short tournament, a structure that doesn't carry the weight of a full season. But in reality, it's everything for them. Because this competition doesn't just offer a trophy, it offers access. Access to European football. For every club in Liechtenstein, this is the only door that leads outward. There is no alternative route, no second chance through league performance. If you want to reach Europe, you have to win this cup. And that changes the meaning of the competition entirely. Because while in the most countries, domestic cups exist alongside the league, in Liechtenstein the cup is the season. It is the objective, the pressure, the entire purpose. And for Vaduz, this has created something unusual. Because with more resources, more experience and a higher level of competition through Swiss leagues, they have become the dominant force in this tournament. Year after year they return, and year after year they win. They are so dominant in the Liechtensteiner Cup that they own the world record of the most domestic cup wins ever by a single club. They have won the competition 50 times, turning a small national competition into a consistent gateway to Europe. But that dominance comes with a strange contradiction, because while Vaduz regularly qualifies for European competitions, they do so from a system that doesn't fully reflect their level. To enter Europe not as a champion of a league, but as winners of a cup in a country without one. And that means every European campaign begins in the same place. Early rounds, lower expectations, a position that rarely matches the quality they've built. And yet, despite all of that, they keep finding their way back. Because when your entire season depends on one path, you learn how to master it. For most clubs, European football is a result for a long season, a reward for consistency, a confirmation that they belong among the best. For Vaduz, it feels different, because every time they enter Europe, they arrive through a path that few clubs share, not as league champions, not as one of the strongest teams in their system, but as winners of a cup from a country without a league. And that changes how they are seen. Lower expectations, less attention, often dismissed before even a ball is kicked. But once the game starts, those assumptions start to fade, because Vaduz does not play like a team that doesn't belong there. They play with structure, with discipline, with a level that reflects the competition they face week after week in Switzerland. And slowly the gap between perception and reality becomes visible. Rounds are passed, opponents are surprised, moments begin to build. Until suddenly this club, from a country without a league, is still there, still competing. Still part of a tournament that was never designed for teams like them. And that is where this story begins to shift, because European football has a way of exposing differences in resources and depth and experience, and eventually those differences become harder to overcome. Vaduz doesn't have the financial strength of bigger clubs, it doesn't have the squad depth required for long European runs, but what it does have is something harder to measure: clarity. A clear path, a clear objective, a system that doesn't change depending on the stage. And that allows them to compete. Not always to win, not always to go far, but enough to belong. Enough to remind the rest of Europe that this club is not here by accident. There are clubs that belong somewhere, to a city, to a league, to a system that defines who they are and where they fit. And then there is Vaduz. a club that doesn't exist in between. Not fully part of the country it represents, because that country doesn't have the structure to contain in. And not fully part of the league it plays in, because it doesn't share the same objectives as the teams around them. Vaduz can't even win the Swiss league. They aren't allowed to do so. They also can't enter European football through the league, because they aren't really part of the system. Week after week, Vaduz competes in Switzerland. It fights for points, it moves through the same table, it follows the same rhythm as every other club. At this moment, FC Vaduz is first in the second league of Switzerland, so there is a big possibility they will gain promotion to the first league of Switzerland, which is quite huge for a small Liechtenstein team. And over time, it creates a sense of logic. A belief that every club follows the same journey, but Vaduz doesn't. Because for this club, the path to the top is not just difficult, it is almost impossible. Not because of lack of quality, not because of ambition, but because the structure itself demands something no club has to do. If they ever want to reach the Champions League, they cannot take the usual route, they cannot rely on a league title because they can't win it. They cannot follow the system designed for everyone else. Instead, they will have to win the Domestic Cup, win the Conference League, win the Europa League, just to earn a place among the best teams in Europe. They need to win 3 competitions, 3 trophies in one path, back to back to back, not as a long-term dream, but the only way to move forward. And maybe that is what makes this story so powerful, because it reminds us that football is not always fair. Not every club starts from the same place, not every system offers the same opportunities, and yet, despite all of that, Vaduz still finds a way to exist, to compete, to reach Europe, to stay part of a game that was never fully designed for them. Because sometimes, football isn't defined by how easy the path is, but by whether a club is willing to follow it anyway. Thank you for watching this episode of Hidden Club Stories. If you want to discover more clubs with identity, history and soul, make sure to subscribe, because somewhere out there, another story is already waiting.